hope you're doing well. Thanks for stopping by today and welcome to another video. Today I want to talk about my favorite art supplies and art supplies that are good if you're just starting out with art and you don't know where to begin. So I am a full-time artist and I paint, and I mainly paint with acrylic, like 95% of the time. The other 5% is watercolor, and that's mainly just for fun and like for travel and stuff. So I have some recommendations for watercolor, but this is going to be mainly for if you're wanting to get into acrylic. And I personally think that acrylic is one of the easiest mediums to start out with, so if you've never painted before, this is a good place to start. Acrylic can be very forgiving, unlike something like watercolor, which is a bit more finicky and a bit more difficult to work with. I have my list here of all my favorite supplies, so let's just get into it. Let's start out with paints, because that's arguably the most important piece of supplies when it comes to painting. So for acrylic paint, what I reach for the most is Liquitex Basics. And it is very beginner friendly. So if you're like a full beginner and you don't have any paints, this would be a really good place to start because you can get a pack of like little tiny tubes of the paint to get a feel for it without spending a ton of money. And then the other paint that I mainly reach for is the Amsterdam Acrylics paint, and that's the standard series. I personally think that the Amsterdam Acrylics standard series and the Liquitex Basics are good quality. And they're good for beginners, and then they're also good for people who've been painting for a while as well. But if you want to go one step higher, I would go for the Liquitex Professional line or Golden Acrylics. Golden Acrylics are amazing, they're just a bit more expensive. And then for watercolor. Okay, so I'm not a watercolor artist, I'm mainly acrylic, but I still like to bring watercolors when I go out to like a park if I want to sketch in a park, or when I go traveling. They're really nice to have for that. So I generally just bring my like travel watercolor tin, and that's by Winsor Newton. You can get them at art supply stores or just again on Amazon as well. You can also build your own palette with watercolor paints, but if you're just starting out, I think the pre-made watercolor pans work just fine. Moving on to surfaces and substrates. For canvases, I generally get mine from Blick, and I go for the Premier line or the Studio line. Right? Yeah, the Premier line or the Studio line. And that's for stretched canvas. If you're just starting out, you can get value packs or like the level 1. And this is a good place to start if you've never painted on canvas, if you don't know what that feels like. Generally when it comes in a value pack, it's not as archival or it's not as like long lasting. So just keep that in mind. If you're ever planning on like trying to sell it, I probably wouldn't go for a value pack. But if you're just playing around, then that is an amazing place to start. And then in addition to Blick, I also get some of my canvases from Michaels, and for that I usually go for the level 2 or the level 3. Again, you can get value packs there as well that are pretty cheap and a lot more affordable. And then the other two brands for canvases that I really like are Masterpiece Pro and Paramount, and I'll link all this below as well. If you think canvas isn't for you and you want to paint on something like a wood panel instead, which is really fun, I have a couple behind me right here. I also go for the Blick Premier and the Blick Studio as well for that, as well as the American Easel wood panels are really good for like circular panels. They're a bit more expensive, but they do make for a really fun piece. And then I also like the ampersand gesso boards and aqua boards and hard boards, and those are a lot thinner, so they're not as thick as that guy back there. So they're really good for storage space. If you don't have a lot of storage space, those are perfect. For paper, I generally actually like to paint on watercolor paper, even with acrylic, because it's thicker, it's generally better quality. For my favorite kind of watercolor paper, I generally go for Arches. It is a bit more expensive, so if you're just starting out and you don't want to spend a lot, I would go for something by Canson, and Canson's really good as well. So brushes is a category that I think I found what I liked right away, so I really haven't experimented that much. So let me just tell you what I usually reach for. Abstract pieces that I want to add a lot of texture into. If you've seen my like swirly pieces, I'll put one in right here. I go for chip brushes. Chip brushes are really cheap, okay? So that's why I started out with these, because I was just like, oh, I just need something to paint with that isn't expensive. You can find them at the hardware store. They add an amazing amount of texture. I think they're meant for like painting your house or like something like that. I don't know. But I use them in my everyday art practice, and they work amazingly. They do shed a little bit, and they don't have the longevity as other brushes do, but they work really well. They add a lot of texture, and they can add a lot of movement into your piece. So hardware store, art supply store, Amazon, you can find them a lot of different places. When I'm not using chip brushes, I generally reach for Princeton brushes. So I get these from Blick as well. I think they're also available on Amazon. And they're good. I think they're a good middle of the ground brush. They're not too expensive, they're not really cheaply made, but if you just want to get a pack of small brushes, Michaels is great for that, as well as some on Amazon too. I'll link some of my favorite ones down below. But honestly, my favorite pack of brushes I ever got was at IKEA. I don't know if they still have it. If I can find it, I'll link it down below. But sometimes a cheap pack of brushes, especially if you're just starting out, is like the perfect way to go. Okay, sorry, my camera overheated. Let's move on to mediums. So acrylic mediums are essentially just acrylic paint without the pigment added. But these can come in lots of different types and formulas, so I just wrote down my favorites that I reach for. So probably the most important one here is gesso. And gesso is something that you use to prep your canvas. If you are already using a pre-gessoed canvas, and if you're just a beginner, you probably don't need to gesso your canvas on top of that, but some artists do still like to gesso their pre-gessoed canvases. Generally, gesso is just white, but you can also get clear gesso and black gesso and maybe some other color gesso, but I've never tried those. I personally really like just the white gesso and the clear gesso. Clear gesso is really fun to use on canvas if you want to keep the like raw canvas look without actually keeping the canvas raw. If you want to go the more textured route, my favorite ones are crackle paste, molding paste, and some sort of like gel medium. Okay, so crackle paste, let me show you. This is what crackle paste does. So you apply it and it cracks over a day or so, and then you can go back and paint on top of it, or at least that's how I use it. And if I want to add more texture to a piece without doing the like abstract crackle, then I go for molding paste, or sometimes it's called modeling paste. I'm pretty sure it's the same thing. I'm pretty sure it's the same thing. When I use that, I generally mix it with paint and then layer it on, and you can build up some really nice and really fun texture. And generally with acrylic mediums, gloss, I'm pretty sure is usually transparent, and then a paste is more opaque. And sometimes I'll use a transparent gloss as well to mix with paint, and that can help build it up, give it more body, but it also makes it more transparent, and I generally like my paint to be more opaque. So for me, I generally go for more of a paste over a gloss, but it really depends on what you want in your work. Our last category is pens and pencils. And this isn't really my forte because I am more of a painter. But if I want to do a little bit of sketching or some drawing, I generally reach for the Pigma Micron pens. You've probably seen them before if you've been in the art space. They're pretty popular. They're really good for drawing, for sketching, if you want to sign your work, because I believe they are archival quality, so they do last a long time as well. And I just started getting into Posca pens. Posca pens, I think. And these are acrylic markers. These are really popular as well, so I'm sure you can find a lot of advice on these, a lot of videos on these. They're new to me, and so far I've been having fun with them. And then lastly, one of my favorite things to draw with are actually watercolor pencils. So I plan out a lot of my pieces using watercolor pencils, because then when you use the acrylic paint on top of that, it blends in really nicely. You don't get any harsh lines. It's much more pleasant than just using a regular pencil or a regular colored pencil. They're fun to use under your watercolors as well, to plan those out, or just to use on their own. Sorry, it's getting kind of warm in here. I'm getting all like flushed. But I think that's all I have for you today. I hope I didn't forget anything. If you think I forgot something, or if I somehow forgot an entire category, let me know down below. If you have a favorite material that you want me to try out, I would be happy to hear about that. Or just tell me whatever your favorite thing to paint with is, or draw with, or make art with. Just generally to create with. Thank you for being here today. If you like this kind of video, let me know. Give it a like, give it a little thumbs up, subscribe for more, and yeah, thanks for watching.